years of silence, and now, something has surfaced. A black tote bag, the same one once whispered about in the Summer Wells case, has reportedly been found near the family's property. It was never in the official reports, never listed as evidence, almost as if it had been erased. But if this is the same tote seen hours before Summer vanished at the creek, then this changes everything. For years, that bag was a rumor, a ghost in the story. Now it's real. And what's inside could expose what truly happened between the water and the woods. Because if the black tote was hidden, someone hid it. And the question isn't where Summer went anymore. It's what that bag was meant to hide. June 15, 2021, a quiet summer evening in Beech Creek, Tennessee. 5-year-old Summer Moon Utah Wells vanished from her family's home on Ben Hill Road, a small hilltop surrounded by woods, dirt roads, and silence thick enough to feel. By nightfall, that silence would become a siren, and by morning, an entire state would be searching for a missing child. The first reports were simple. A 5-year-old girl, last seen around 6:30 in the evening, possibly barefoot, wearing a pink shirt and gray shorts. That's what the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation published within hours. It was direct, minimal, the kind of bulletin law enforcement issues every day. But inside that simplicity, something was missing. Something that had been said, then quietly erased. In her first recorded interview, CanDus Wells, Summer's mother, told investigator Chris McDonough that her daughter might have taken my mom's black tote. It had craft stuff. A single sentence, spoken casually, as if it were unimportant. But in a case built entirely on minutes and missing objects, that sentence matters. Because that tote, the black bag CanDus mentioned, never appeared again. Not in the police files, not in the TBI statements, not in any evidence report. It existed only in words. To most listeners, the comment might have sounded harmless, a detail too trivial to notice. A little girl taking her grandmother's craft bag while going downstairs to play. But in hindsight, it's one of the strangest omissions in the entire case. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, known for being meticulous, cataloged everything: the last clothes Summer wore, the items found around the house, even the layout of the basement she supposedly entered. Yet there is no mention of any tote bag, black or otherwise. Not a photograph, not a property tag, not a single log number. The object simply doesn't exist on paper. And that raises a question no one in authority has ever answered. If the mother described a bag that was supposedly with Summer when she vanished, why wasn't it included? Was it overlooked, dismissed, or deliberately removed? When you start to examine the timeline, the gap becomes more obvious. According to official statements, CanDus Harrer, her mother, and Summer spent the afternoon at Horse Creek, a small waterhole in Hawkins County. They returned home around 6 p.m. and began planting flowers near the front porch. At 6:23 p.m., CanDus said she saw Summer run into the house to play with her toys. That's the last moment anyone claims to have seen the child alive. 7 minutes later, at 6:30, Summer was gone. Police arrived by 7 p.m., a fast response for a rural county, and launched what would become one of Tennessee's largest missing child searches. Within 12 hours, a statewide endangered child alert was issued, followed by an Amber Alert. Dozens of officers, volunteers, and cadaver dogs scoured the woods. Helicopters swept over the hills, but no trace of the girl or of the black tote was ever found. And yet, that one line from CanDus's early interview lingers. She might have taken my mom's black tote. It's an odd phrase. Might have. It implies uncertainty, a guess rather than a fact. But what's more striking is that it was never repeated. In later interviews, when CanDus was asked to recount that day, she omitted the tote entirely. She described the flowers, the toys, the basement door, but never the bag. This kind of shift, in forensic psychology, is called a narrative deletion, when a detail that originally appears in a statement is later dropped without explanation. It can mean the witness misremembered, or it can mean they remembered too clearly and wanted to forget. There are 3 possible explanations for why the tote vanished from the record. 1. The tote never existed. Maybe CanDus spoke loosely, mentioning something she thought was there but wasn't. Maybe she confused that day with another. If so, it was an innocent mistake, but one that's still bizarre in a disappearance investigated at this scale. 2. The tote existed, but investigators ruled it irrelevant. Perhaps the TBI located it during the initial search, found nothing of value inside, and excluded it from the final reports. But that theory has problems too. In child abduction cases, every item connected to the child is documented, even blankets and toys. It would be unusual, almost negligent, for a bag mentioned in a key witness statement to be ignored entirely. 3. The tote existed and was removed from the record. This is the possibility that keeps resurfacing in online investigations. If the bag contained something sensitive, something that contradicted the family's account, then erasing its presence might serve a purpose. It's not speculation without foundation. In the months following Summer's disappearance, the Wells family's statements were inconsistent on multiple points. Times changed. Locations shifted. Even descriptions of who was home evolved. That alone makes the absence of the tote more suspicious, not because it proves guilt, but because it represents the same pattern: details appear, then disappear. When a physical object follows that same trajectory, investigators usually take notice. But here, no one did. The tote never became part of the official narrative, yet it survived in the unofficial one. In Reddit threads, Facebook groups, and X posts, strangers dissected that forgotten sentence from CanDus's interview. Some said the bag might have been seen in the waterhole video near Hunter, the friend who was with them that day. Others believed the tote could have been left in the truck, overlooked when police arrived. Theories multiplied. But the core issue stayed the same: an object mentioned once and never again. The question, then, isn't whether the tote was real. The question is why it disappeared from documentation so early. Because if CanDus was right, if her daughter took that bag into the basement, then it should have been one of the first things officers noticed when they searched the house that night. Instead, nothing. No officer reported finding a tote. No photographs show one in the basement or yard. And the TBI's public statements, from 2021 through 2025, never include any item that matches its description. What's even stranger is that when independent journalists tried to cross-check the inventory list released under Tennessee's Public Records Act, there's a gap. The list jumps from children's toys to miscellaneous storage boxes, with no mention of a bag. Either it was there and removed, or it was never there to begin with. To this day, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has made no comment on the matter. When contacted by reporters in 2025, a spokesperson simply said, "We have nothing to add regarding any specific items that may or may not have been collected." That phrase, "may or may not have been collected," only deepened the mystery. For most people, the disappearance of a 5-year-old is tragic enough. But for those who study this case, the black tote became something else, a symbol of the missing hour, the gap between what was said and what was recorded. Every major unsolved case has one, an item too strange to fit, too uncomfortable to keep in the open. For the Wells case, it's the tote, a single object, mentioned in passing, now hovering like a shadow over every timeline, every theory, every reconstruction. So what happened to it? Did it ever exist outside that sentence? Was it found and dismissed, or hidden and forgotten? And if it truly was taken into the basement with Summer, where did it go after she was gone? Because a bag can't vanish by itself. And if the tote disappeared the same hour Summer did, then maybe, just maybe, their stories are the same. If the black tote was ever real, the last time anyone could have seen it wasn't in that basement. It was by the water. That afternoon, June 15th, 2021, CanDus Wells took her daughter, Summer, and a teenage friend named Hunter to a swimming spot locals call Horse Creek. It's the same trip she later described in every interview. A simple summer afternoon, swimming, laughing, taking photos, a quick stop before heading home. But the thing about that trip is this: it's the last time Summer Wells was ever filmed alive. A short video of that day was uploaded to TikTok and later reposted on YouTube under the title, "The Creek Summer Wells Was Swimming." It's been mirrored, edited, slowed down, dissected, and to this day, it's the most analyzed 30 seconds of footage in the entire case. In it, we see Summer near the shallow water. CanDus is recording. Hunter is beside her. They look normal, tired, sun-dazed, unaware that these seconds would become evidence. But there's something else. Near Hunter, on the ground, a dark object. It's low to the dirt, partly wet, hard to make out. Some call it a shadow. Some call it a bag. If you pause the video around the 15 to 20-second mark, depending on which repost you're watching, you can see it rectangular, soft-sided, about the size of a tote or duffel. That's all we can actually say with certainty. A dark shape. Low to the ground, close to Hunter. No one, not the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, not the Hawkins County Sheriff's Office, has ever confirmed what that object is. It's never been named in an evidence log, never photographed for public release. But the internet noticed, and the internet doesn't wait for confirmation. Within days, TikTok creators and Reddit users began zooming in, slowing the clip frame by frame. Some inverted the colors. Others measured the object's scale using Hunter's hand as reference, and soon the discussion shifted from, "What is that?" to, "Why is no one talking about it?" A Twitter user, the Philosophia1, posted a still frame in August 2021 with the caption, "You see Hunter putting something in a black bag. Why wasn't it taken for evidence?" That tweet went viral among the online sleuth community. To many, this was it. The first visual proof of the black tote bag CanDus had mentioned weeks earlier in her interview with investigator Chris McDonough. "She might have taken my mom's black tote. It had craft stuff." That sentence, black tote, became the bridge connecting the interview to the video. But here's what the facts show. CanDus did mention a black tote in her own words. The waterhole video does show a dark, bag-shaped object. And that's where confirmed reality stops. Everything beyond that line is speculation. People have guessed for years what was inside that supposed bag. The most common explanation is harmless, wet clothes and towels from the swim. It fits. They'd been in the water. Summer had changed into dry clothes. Someone had to carry the wet ones. But that's where the logic starts to twist. If those clothes were inside a bag, that bag should have gone home with them. Yet, when the search began that evening, there's no mention of any tote. Not in photos. Not in reports. Not in a single press statement. So, either the bag stayed at the creek, or it never existed at all. The next explanation people offer is that it was a normal family tote, something they always kept in the truck. CanDus even said in one live stream that her mother, Grandis, always had her craft tote in the car. That might have settled things, except for one problem. Grandis herself has never publicly confirmed that story. No interview, no transcript, no clip where she says, "Yes, that was my tote." And when reporters later asked TBI about it, the agency refused to comment, repeating their standard line, "We have nothing to add regarding any specific items that may or may not have been collected." That phrase, "may or may not have been collected," left more questions than answers. Still, the community took sides. Some saw that dark shape as proof that the tote was real, visible evidence that law enforcement ignored. Others saw it as another example of the internet creating patterns from pixels. Because let's be clear, the footage itself is low resolution, re-uploaded, and altered dozens of times. There is no verified, high-quality frame that proves Hunter placed anything into a bag. What viewers are looking at are shadows and guesses. But in true crime, guesses spread faster than facts. By late 2021, dozens of YouTube channels had reposted the same clip, circling the object in red, labeling it the bag, the missing tote, or the clue police ignored. In those videos, a myth was born, that the black tote seen at the creek was the same bag Summer supposedly carried into the basement before she disappeared. It's a powerful image, a link between the water and the house, between the last place Summer was seen alive and the place she was said to vanish. But image is not evidence. The truth is simple and frustrating. No agency has authenticated any tote in that footage, and there is no record of a black bag being seized from the scene, the truck, or the property. Even so, the pattern is eerie. The creek is the last place where Summer appears on camera, carefree, smiling, playing in the water. And the next moment in the timeline, the drive home, is where everything unravels. Between those 2 points, the visual record ends. After the creek, there are no videos, no photos, no neighbors who saw them arrive. The story switches from film to testimony, from what we can see to what we're told. And that's the space where contradictions live. When you follow that gap between the creek and the house, every unanswered question leads back to that black tote. If it was there, why isn't it anywhere in the case file? If it wasn't there, why did CanDus remember it so clearly? And if it existed but was removed, who took it and why? Even now, people still freeze that same frame and argue about what they see. Some swear they can make out handles. Others say it's just a towel. The truth: both could be right, because the footage isn't clear enough to prove either. That's the danger with evidence born on the internet. It lives halfway between truth and imagination. What's undeniable is this: the waterhole footage marks the last verifiable time Summer Wells was seen alive, and the last public appearance of anything that could resemble a black tote. After that, it vanishes, from screens, from records, from memory. So, we're left with a paradox: a mother who once mentioned a tote, a video that might show one, an investigation that never logged it. It's not proof, but it's a thread, one that runs through the only images we have of Summer's final day. From here, the case stops being visual and becomes temporal. The next piece isn't about what we can see, it's about when. The time between the creek and the house, the short drive that reshaped everything. And that's where we go next. Because if the video marks the last sight, then the timeline marks the first lie. The deeper this case goes, the clearer one truth becomes: Summer Wells didn't just vanish. The timeline itself unraveled. For investigators, a disappearance is a sequence of verifiable minutes. Each sighting, each movement, each call must connect. But in the Summer Wells investigation, that chain breaks between 6:23 and 6:30 p.m., 7 minutes. A gap small enough to overlook, yet wide enough to swallow both a child and an unanswered question: what happened to the black tote? The official account, according to the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, is almost mechanical. Between 3 and 4 p.m. Summer, her mother CanDus, her grandmother Grandis, and a teenage friend named Hunter spent time at a swimming hole in Horse Creek. By 6 p.m., they were home again on Ben Hill Road, planting flowers near the front porch. At 6:23, CanDus said she saw her daughter run inside to play in the basement. At 6:30, Summer was gone, and by 7, police were already on their way. It sounds orderly, too orderly, until you start asking what existed inside those 7 minutes. Because in that tiny window of time, something else vanishes too. The tote. The same black tote bag CanDus once described when recounting that day. A line that most people ignored at first, but one that becomes impossible to dismiss when you start measuring the clock. If CanDus was telling the truth, the tote should have followed the same path as Summer. It would have left the creek, traveled in the truck, and arrived at the house. But no one, not CanDus, not Grandis, not Hunter, ever confirmed seeing it during or after that drive home. Police never logged it. No photos from that evening show anything resembling a black bag. Not in the yard, not in the house, not in any footage released publicly. Somewhere between Horse Creek and Ben Hill Road, the tote simply disappears from existence. The drive itself is short, about 25 minutes through the back roads of Hawkins County. It's mostly forest, no cameras, no witnesses. CanDus later said they made one stop near her mother's trailer to drop off groceries before returning home. Hunter remembered things differently, describing a separate order of events. Their timelines never perfectly align, and yet, in both versions, one detail is missing: the tote. If it had been left at the creek, the search teams would have found it. The next day, hundreds of volunteers and TBI agents scoured Horse Creek with drones, dive teams, and sent dogs. They collected every item in sight: clothing, debris, even footprints. But there was no report of a tote, black or otherwise. If it came home, it would have been one of the first items visible to law enforcement that night. But when the first officers entered the basement, they found toys, bedding, storage boxes, no bag. When the cadaver dogs swept the property, they detected nothing related to fabric or scent from the creek. When the TBI released summaries of recovered evidence, the tote wasn't listed anywhere. CanDus's original phrasing, "She might have taken my mom's black tote," suddenly becomes critical. That uncertainty, might have, suggests a guess, not a fact. And when law enforcement pressed for clarity in later interviews, CanDus stopped mentioning the tote altogether. So the question becomes, if the tote was never seen again, where did it go? A theory that circulated on Reddit in mid-2021 claimed a black tote, or toolbox, was spotted in the bed of a red truck near Beach Creek the same evening. The post didn't name a driver or provide a plate number, but it was enough to feed speculation. The TBI publicly acknowledged that they were seeking information about a red Toyota pickup seen in the area, a lead that was investigated and later declared inconclusive. Still, it's the only external sighting that ever linked a black object, a truck, and that time frame together. If true, it could place the tote outside the Wells home during the exact hour Summer vanished. But no witness ever came forward, and the truck's owner was never confirmed. Like the tote, that lead disappeared into silence. When investigators reconstructed the events of June 15th, they were forced to rely almost entirely on CanDus's statements. The sequence is tight. They arrive home, plant flowers, Summer goes inside, CanDus follows minutes later. But in a case built around a child's last known actions, those minutes are everything. Between 6:23 and 6:30 p.m., there are no phone records, no neighbors who saw or heard anything, and no verified camera footage. The TBI timeline simply skips from Summer went inside to Summer was missing. And in that gap, both she and the tote vanish from history. If the tote truly existed, it could act as a physical marker, something to measure Summer's movement by. If she carried it downstairs, police would have found it during the first search. If she left it outside, it should have been recovered in the yard or the truck. The absence of either discovery means one of two things. The tote was never there, or it was removed before authorities arrived. Removing an object in such a short window, under 10 minutes, would require both opportunity and intent. CanDus said she was outside, tending flowers, while her mother was nearby. Don Wells, Summer's father, was at work. There were no confirmed visitors at that time. So who could have moved anything without being seen? That's where the timeline collapses under its own weight. To this day, there is no explanation for what happened inside those 7 minutes. The phone call to 911 was logged at 6:30 p.m., meaning CanDus noticed her daughter missing almost immediately. She told dispatchers she had searched the basement and the yard. If the tote had been in either location, she would have seen it then. Yet she didn't mention it once in the call. Even when you strip away every rumor and theory, the parallel is eerie. 2 disappearances, 1 child, 1 object, same time frame. Maybe that connection is coincidence, or maybe it's the pattern the case was built to hide. In law enforcement, investigators are trained to treat missing items as indicators, not evidence. What's gone can tell you who moved, who panicked, and who cleaned up. But in this case, the absence is so total that it forms a wall. The black tote isn't just missing from the house, it's missing from the narrative. It exists only in one mother's uncertain sentence and in the silence that followed. Still, patterns leave echoes. The tote was mentioned once when the story was fresh, then never again. Summer's brothers were removed from the home soon after, the property sealed, the investigation broadened. No search warrant or recovery log ever surfaced mentioning a tote. The only place it appears is in community memory, tied forever to the 7-minute void. That's what makes the gap so dangerous. Between 6:23 and 6:30 p.m., something irreversible happened, something fast, deliberate, and final. Maybe the tote was a harmless craft bag that got left behind. Maybe it was nothing. Or maybe it was the first object moved in a cover-up that unfolded faster than anyone could record. All we know is this: when the first officers stepped onto Ben Hill Road that night, both Summer and the black tote were gone. No trace of either. No clear timeline. Just silence where movement should have been. And in investigations like this, silence is never empty, it's occupied. By 7 p.m., search dogs were already in the woods, following a scent trail that faded about 200 yards from the house. The TBI logged it, then never mentioned a bag or container again. The official timeline closes its pages right there, at 6:30. 2 disappearances, 1 hour, 1 gap. If you believe in coincidences, it ends there. If you don't, then you know this case didn't start in the basement. It started the moment both of them vanished from the record. And that missing piece, the tote that left no footprint, is the thread that pulls everything else apart. Because if the timeline itself can lose an object, it can lose a truth too. Every major disappearance eventually births a theory that crosses the line between fear and forbidden logic. In the Summer Wells case, that line took the shape of a single, unverified claim, a rumor that began quietly on Reddit and spread like static across every corner of true crime media. What if Summer died that day, and the black tote was used to hide her? It started, as most internet legends do, with absence. No trace of Summer, no trace of the tote. 2 vanishings, same timeline. And for some people online, that wasn't coincidence, it was connection. The first post appeared on missing persons during the summer of 2021. From a user speculating that the dark bag seen near Hunter in the waterhole video could have been large enough to hold a small child. The claim was quickly challenged and later deleted, but screenshots survived, reposted on smaller subreddits like Summer Wells and True Crime Community. From there, the theory evolved. By late 2022, dozens of threads repeated the same assumption, that the reason neither the child nor the tote were ever found is because both were disposed of together. None of those threads provided proof, only pattern. Users compared timestamps, analyzed shadows, and argued over the logic of silence. If she drowned at the creek, one commenter wrote, and panic set in, what would you do with a body? You'd hide it fast. Others pushed back, calling the idea morbid, cruel, and irresponsible. Moderators eventually locked several of those discussions, but the screenshots continued circulating on X and TikTok, under the phrase, tote theory. To be clear, law enforcement has never endorsed this narrative. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation has made no statement suggesting foul play occurred at the creek, and no evidence has ever been presented to indicate that Summer Wells died there. The coroner's office, the FBI, and the local sheriff have all maintained the case as open and active, not resolved. Still, the idea refuses to die. Why? Because of what wasn't found. When the first team searched the property and surrounding areas, they collected thousands of photographs, drone images, and scent dog readings. They recovered toys, tools, and household items, but nothing matching CanDus's early description of a black tote with craft stuff. That gap in evidence created a vacuum, and the internet filled it. Reddit users began constructing what they called the drowning hypothesis. It goes like this: Summer may have accidentally drowned during the Horse Creek outing. Instead of calling authorities, someone panicked and concealed the event. The black tote, mentioned once in an interview and never logged by TBI, became the theoretical container used to move or conceal the body. Afterward, both tote and contents were disposed of, explaining why neither reappeared in official reports. It's a chilling picture, one built entirely on speculation, not evidence. But on Reddit, imagination has a half-life. Once an idea is spoken, it becomes a language of its own. By early 2023, YouTube channels began repeating the rumor under titles like, "Was the black tote the key to the case?" and "Summer's final ride." Each version recycled the same unverified claims: that the video at the creek showed a tote large enough to carry a child, that the dogs lost her scent near water, that CanDus stopped mentioning the bag after investigators questioned her. Individually, none of those facts mean anything. Together, they formed a ghost map of what people wanted to believe. Professional analysts have since explained why such a theory spreads so easily. When an investigation stalls, the human brain searches for symmetry. 2 disappearances in the same hour, the child and the tote, offer perfect symmetry. It doesn't matter whether the link is real, psychologically, it feels like closure. The tote becomes a container not for evidence, but for explanation. Still, even among amateur sleuths, the drowning and concealment scenario met resistance. Some pointed out the lack of forensic feasibility, no waterlogged clothing was reported, no signs of panic at the creek, and no verified witness seeing distress that afternoon. Others noted the terrain steep, wooded, full of wildlife, making any hurried concealment almost impossible without trace. The Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, in its periodic updates, subtly addressed these theories without naming them. In statements released through 2024 and 2025, the agency reiterated, there is no publicly confirmed evidence suggesting Summer Wells left the area by water or vehicle. All credible leads continue to be investigated. That single sentence, no publicly confirmed evidence, is both the line and the loophole. For skeptics, it means TBI found nothing to support the Reddit rumor. For believers, it means the truth is being withheld. That's how the Tote theory transformed from speculation into subculture. Inside the forums, diagrams appeared, hand-drawn maps of Horse Creek, timelines of when each person was last seen, even 3D models estimating the size of a standard craft tote versus a 5-year-old child. It became a dark kind of citizen science, methodical, obsessive, fueled by frustration. But the problem with online investigation is that it rarely ends where it began. The longer people searched for the tote, the more symbolic it became. It stopped representing a bag, it started representing the missing hour itself. For some, believing Summer had died that day wasn't cruelty, it was control. It made the chaos make sense. For others, it was pure exploitation, a theory designed to drive clicks, outrage, and despair. The truth sits somewhere between empathy and obsession. What can be confirmed is this: the TBI never found any object matching the description of a black tote bag. No credible witness has ever claimed to see a tote after 6 p.m. on June 15, 2021. No physical evidence supports the claim that a death occurred at Horse Creek, and the rumor of concealment originated solely from online speculation, not from any official statement or leak. Even so, the timing is impossible to ignore. The tote and Summer disappear within the same 7-minute window. In a case built on fragments, that overlap is enough to feed endless suspicion. One Reddit user summed it up perfectly: "It's not that we know what happened. It's that the silence makes anything possible." That's the curse of unsolved cases. The quieter the truth, the louder the theories. Whether you see the tote as a symbol, a rumor, or an overlooked clue, it has become part of the Summer Wells mythology. A shadow object, both present and absent, carrying the weight of what no one can prove. And if you strip away the noise, what remains is the same haunting fact that started it all. A child and an object vanished together, and in 4 years, not a single confirmed trace of either has surfaced. No matter how many theories rise and fall, that absence still speaks louder than all of them. Somewhere between Horse Creek and Ben Hill Road, something real disappeared, whether it was evidence, memory, or both. And until that silence breaks, the black tote will remain what it's always been: a vessel for everything the world still doesn't know. The more CanDus Wells spoke publicly, the stranger her recollections became. Details that once seemed fixed began to shift: the order of events, the places, the people, even her own words about the tote. In every unsolved case, there's one person whose words start to bend under time. In the disappearance of Summer Wells, that person is her mother, CanDus Wells. From the very beginning, CanDus's voice shaped the story. She was the one who called 911. The one who told police her daughter ran into the basement and vanished. The one who first introduced the black tote bag, and then just as quickly, made it disappear from her own memory. When investigator Chris McDonough interviewed CanDus in the summer of 2021, the case was still raw, the wounds still open. It was the first time she gave a detailed account of the day Summer went missing. Her tone was uncertain, defensive, but candid enough to sound spontaneous. And within that hour-long conversation, one line stood out: "She had my mom's black tote." At the time, no one realized how significant that sentence might become. It was a passing remark, almost an afterthought, explaining what Summer might have carried into the basement. The black tote was described as belonging to her grandmother, full of craft supplies. But as the investigation grew colder, that small detail began to feel like the one that didn't fit. By the next year, CanDus's story started to change. In a 2022 livestream Q&A, broadcast on a community YouTube channel, she faced direct questions from viewers about that bag. Her response was curt, almost dismissive: "I don't remember any bag." The gone was the certainty from the first interview. Gone was the description of ownership, color, contents. It was as if the tote, once specific enough to belong to my mom, had been erased entirely. By 2025, during a televised conversation with WJHL, CanDus no longer mentioned the tote at all. She spoke about the search, about online harassment, about her faith, but never once about the object she had originally linked to Summer's final moments. When journalists asked about inconsistencies between her statements, She said only, "People twist my words. I just want my baby found." To outside observers, that pattern might sound harmless, memory fading, trauma reshaping detail. But to forensic analysts and behavioral experts, it fits a recognizable psychological pattern, an inconsistency marker. Inconsistency markers appear when a witness subconsciously removes or alters a detail that causes discomfort, fear, or guilt. It doesn't automatically mean deception, but it signals internal conflict. When the same person first introduces a key detail and later denies remembering it, investigators don't just note the absence, they study its direction. In this case, the direction is deliberate, from clarity to confusion. From "she had the black tote" to "I don't remember any bag." There are three possible explanations, none of them definitive but all plausible. First, avoidance. CanDus may have downplayed the tote to deflect suspicion. By 2022, online theories about the black tote had exploded across Reddit and YouTube, many accusing her of hiding evidence. Under that kind of scrutiny, anyone might grow defensive, choosing to delete details that fuel further attack. Saying, "I don't remember," can be an act of self-protection, not concealment. Second, contamination. The tote could have contained something that, while innocent, looked incriminating: wet clothing from the creek, a towel with Summer's DNA, or simply items that linked back to the earlier part of the day. Once investigators or the public began connecting those objects to the disappearance, CanDus may have realized how quickly context could turn against her. It's easier to erase a detail than to explain it. Third, psychological fatigue. By 2025, CanDus had lived 4 years under constant pressure. Every interview, every post, every rumor forced her to relive the worst day of her life. Trauma can fracture memory. It can cause selective amnesia, distortion, or repetition. What she once said with certainty could later become blurred by stress and exhaustion. But intent aside, the result is the same. The tote vanished from her story, and that disappearance reshaped the way the public viewed her. Online, suspicion hardened into judgment. Threads filled with comments like, "If she stopped mentioning it, it means she knows more?" On TikTok, clips compared her body language between interviews, noting when she looked down, when she hesitated, when she avoided eye contact after the word "tote" came up. Whether or not any of it was meaningful, it created a new narrative. That CanDus wasn't just forgetting, she was hiding. That perception stuck. What's ironic is that no investigator has ever accused her of concealing evidence. The TBI has said repeatedly that no one has been charged or cleared in the case. But in the court of public opinion, inconsistency becomes guilt. Every time CanDus revised a sentence, the internet turned it into motive. Behavioral analysts often warn that silence doesn't always mean deceit. Sometimes it means overload. But in this case, silence about the tote took on a life of its own. It became a symbol of contradiction, the only tangible object, linking two separate narratives, one told by the mother, and one told by the absence of her child. It's hard not to notice how that silence aligns with the other vanishing details: the missing 7 minutes, the missing red truck, the missing physical evidence. In a story filled with gaps, CanDus's memory became just another one. Some observers argue that CanDus's shifting words don't reveal guilt, they reveal trauma. When memory becomes a weapon used against you, you start editing it for survival. Others believe the changes are too specific to ignore: the color, the ownership, the removal of the word "tote" altogether. As one Reddit user wrote, "People forget feelings, not objects. If she forgot the bag, it's because she wants to forget what was inside it." That line, though speculative, captures why the tote remains the most fragile point in her narrative. It's the crack that never healed, the place where public doubt seeps in. What we know is that the tote was introduced once, then erased twice, and in 4 years, never verified by anyone else. That single progression, mention, denial, omission, is what psychologists call narrative decay. It's what happens when a story begins to collapse under its own revisions. No one can prove that CanDus Wells deliberately changed her story. No one can prove she didn't. What remains is the residue, the pattern, the missing object, and the shifting words that now define the space where facts should be. Every time CanDus spoke, the tote moved further away, first from the creek, then from the house, and finally from memory. And in a case where every missing thing seems to echo another, her silence became its own evidence, not of what she did, but of what this story has done to her. Because the truth isn't just about what was lost that day, it's about what people stopped being able to say. By 2025, the black tote had become more myth than memory, until someone claimed they'd found it. A YouTube video, a shaky camera, and a claim that reawakened everything that TBI had tried to silence. Whether it was real or not, it forced the question no one was ready to face. What happens when a rumor buried for years suddenly takes physical form? 4 years after Summer Wells vanished, the story most people had tried to forget suddenly came back to life through a single YouTube upload. On the evening of September 3, 2025, a video appeared under the title, CanDus, I Found the Black Tote. The clip was barely 3 minutes long, filmed on a phone camera, shaky, unfocused, the kind of low-resolution chaos that true crime thrives on. But what it showed, or claimed to show, was enough to set the internet on fire. A man's voice, unidentified, breathes heavily behind the camera. The lens shakes as he steps through a thicket of brush, sunlight bleeding through the trees. Then, near a patch of dirt and leaves, the camera lands on it, a black nylon tote, weathered and half buried, with faded white lettering that reads, Cowboys. He mutters, "This is it. This is the bag." Within hours, the video had been mirrored across Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube commentary channels. The title alone, I Found the Black Tote, reignited every dormant theory about the Wells case. According to the uploader, the bag was discovered near the property of CanDus, Summer's grandmother, whose trailer sits just downhill from the Wells family home. He claimed the coordinates matched a wooded slope behind the shed, an area that had supposedly been searched in 2021. He said he had already contacted the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation, but that they didn't want to talk. When journalists later reached out to the TBI for confirmation, spokesperson issued the same brief response used so many times before, "We do not comment on items that may or may not be connected to this ongoing investigation." That sentence, vague, cautious, procedural, only made things worse. Because silence, in this case, sounded like validation. The reactions were immediate, polarized and vicious. On one side, the believers. They said the logo on the bag, Cowboys, matched a post from 2022 when a user named Lady Durr tweeted a list of leaked inventory, items allegedly from the Wells property, including something labeled, Cowboys bag, picnic items. For these viewers, that overlap was proof. They saw the weathered nylon, the same word printed in white, and connected it directly to the missing tote CanDus had mentioned years earlier. To them, this wasn't coincidence, it was continuity. Evidence resurfaced. Many of these users believed the bag had been there since 2021, overlooked by search teams, buried by rain and soil, waiting to be found. Others speculated the TBI already knew about it, but had withheld information to protect the integrity of the investigation. Then came the skeptics. They pointed out the lack of verifiable metadata, no GPS coordinates shown, no date stamp, no clear establishing shot. The bag could have been filmed anywhere. Some even noticed inconsistencies. The vegetation didn't match early footage of the Wells property, and the soil looked too dry for Beech Creek's terrain that time of year. A few users went further, suggesting the whole thing was staged, a social media stunt designed to bait engagement, exploit tragedy, or drive clicks. Anyone can bury an old tote. One Reddit comment read, "That doesn't make it the tote." The debate split the internet in half. Believers called it proof. Skeptics called it performance. But everyone watched. What made the clip so compelling wasn't the image itself, it was the context. The bag looked ordinary, black nylon, scuffed, torn at one handle. Inside, according to the uploader, there was nothing but dirt and water. But its supposed location, behind CanDus's trailer, struck a nerve. That area, according to older search logs, had been covered early in the investigation, but never officially cleared in public documents. A few users claimed they were able to cross-reference the background trees and terrain with Google Earth imagery, concluding that the video was filmed within a few hundred feet of the Wells property. They pointed to a distinct angle of the slope, a tree scar visible in both the video and satellite view. A match, they said, too specific to fake. Others countered with simple skepticism. If someone really found a bag that could be tied to an active missing child case, why post it to YouTube before giving it to police? That question remains unanswered. What's most striking about the "found tote" clip isn't whether it's real, it's how quickly it became real in public consciousness. For 4 years, the black tote had been an idea, a phrase spoken once by a grieving mother and kept alive by forums and digital detectives. Suddenly, it was tangible. It had color, texture, dirt, decay. And even if the bag turned out to be unrelated, the discovery altered the collective memory of the case. People began saying, "See, the tote was real all along." That sentence echoed across threads, YouTube comments, and Discord groups. It didn't matter that the video lacked verification. What mattered was confirmation bias, that human hunger for closure. When you've stared at an absence for 4 years, any object that fits the silhouette becomes the truth. Weeks later, small online investigators claimed to have traced the uploader's IP location to somewhere near Kingsport, Tennessee, roughly 40 minutes from Beach Creek. He never revealed his name, and the original video was quietly deleted within 10 days. But by then, the damage was done. Dozens of reuploads kept it alive. No forensics team ever announced recovering the bag. No agency logged it as evidence. The TBI never commented again. But within the online community, the bag had already been accepted as fact. Maybe it was just an old tote, dumped years ago, branded with a Cowboys logo like millions of others. Or maybe, as some insisted, it had been placed there recently, deliberately, as a message. Either way, it forced the case back into public view. Because once you tell people a myth has been found, they stop asking whether it's true. They start asking what it means. And what it meant, to thousands watching that shaky footage, was simple and terrifying. That the black tote wasn't just a rumor. It existed. And if it existed, then someone, somewhere, knew why it had to be buried. What began as a blurry 3-minute upload turned into a digital wildfire, spreading across Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube like proof of revelation. The tote was no longer a forgotten detail. It was a symbol resurrected by belief. By the time 2025 began, the black tote had already outlived its purpose, and maybe even its reality. What started as a single sentence in CanDus Wells' early interview had become something else entirely, a digital monument built by strangers, maintained by obsession. Between 2022 and 2024, the phrase, black tote, turned into a signal word across Reddit, TikTok, and YouTube, a kind of password for anyone who wanted to prove they'd been following the case since the beginning. People didn't just discuss the tote, they built it. Thousands of users slowed the Horse Creek video to 1 frame per second, circling dark patches, aligning pixels, comparing proportions. They measured Hunter's forearm to estimate the tote's dimensions, adjusted color contrast to guess its material, nylon, maybe canvas. They analyzed the light on the bag to estimate direction, the soil around it to guess depth. This wasn't chaos. It was collective investigation. A user on Summer Wells uploaded a 20-page document called Timeline of the Tote, charting its supposed journey from the creek to the basement, cross-referenced with known movements of every family member that day. Others built digital maps, 3D recreations of the Wells property, and AI-enhanced frames of the waterhole footage. The more they looked, the less they agreed, but disagreement only made the theory stronger. By mid-2023, the tote had become the most discussed object in the case, surpassing even the red truck, the basement door, and the family's alibi. A few YouTube channels claimed to have exclusive photos showing a black bag in the bed of a red pickup truck parked near Ben Hill Road, supposedly taken the evening Summer disappeared. Within days, those videos were removed for unverified material, but the screenshots had already been saved, reposted, and archived. The content vanished, but the myth survived. That's how the internet works. Once an image attaches to a mystery, it becomes evidence whether it deserves to or not. The tote stopped being an object and became a story engine. People called it the clue that police missed, the key to the missing 7 minutes, the bag that held the truth. The online community split in two. The believers treated the tote as a real artifact, the missing link in the timeline. They believed it was the bridge between the creek and the house, the moment when Summer's day shifted from innocence to tragedy. For them, the tote explained everything: why the timeline didn't match, why certain areas weren't photographed, why TBI never said what they'd found. The deniers, on the other hand, saw it as digital hysteria. They said the bag, if it existed at all, was just a picnic tote or a grocery bag. They accused the believers of turning grief into conspiracy and blamed YouTube creators for monetizing someone's child's disappearance. But by then, the debate didn't matter. The tote had already escaped into collective consciousness. When thousands of people repeat the same detail for years, it stops being rumor and becomes record. The longer the investigation stayed silent, the more power the tote gained. In a way, the bag became more real than any evidence on file. For many, it symbolized what official investigators refused to acknowledge, that there were unanswered questions being buried with bureaucratic indifference. For others, it represented the internet's worst habit: mistaking imagination for proof. Still, both sides shared one belief: the black tote existed somewhere, and someone knew where it had gone. But while the internet talked, the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation didn't. Through 4 years of updates, press releases, and vigils, the agency never once confirmed or denied the existence of any tote. That silence became its own kind of statement, a blank space that both conspiracy and caution could live inside. People wondered why. Was it negligence or strategy? Those familiar with Tennessee procedure know the answer is rarely simple. The TBI doesn't disclose evidence unless it serves a public identification purpose, say, confirming a suspect's vehicle, or asking citizens to look for a specific object. If an item is connected to forensic analysis or DNA testing, it's sealed, sometimes for years. That's why when reporters asked the Bureau whether a tote had ever been collected from the Wells property, they got the same response every time: "What cannot comment on items that may or may not have been collected." A source quoted by Fox 17 explained it bluntly: if it existed, it would be in evidence storage. It doesn't confirm or deny. It simply suspends the question in air, where it has stayed ever since. No public record lists a black tote as part of the evidence catalog from 2021. No document leaked under Tennessee's open records requests references it. There's not even a redacted entry that fits the description. And yet, people who have followed the case believe that absence is exactly what makes it important. Some say the Bureau's silence is deliberate, a trap for future confessions. If someone someday claims to have handled the tote, investigators can test whether their story matches details never released to the public. Others think the silence hides uncertainty, that the agency simply can't confirm the bag's relevance and prefers omission to speculation. There's precedent for both. In the Evelyn Boswell case of 2020, also in Tennessee, crucial pieces of evidence were withheld for over 2 years while investigators awaited forensic processing. By the time those details were made public, online forums had already filled the gap with their own versions of truth. The same thing happened here, because silence, once it lasts long enough, begins to sound like permission. Each time the TBI avoided the question, it gave the tote theory another breath of life. Every no comment became an echo chamber, people reading confirmation between the words. To the investigators, silence preserves the case. To the internet, silence proves the case. That's the paradox that defines modern true crime. The more carefully authorities protect an investigation, the more the public believes they're hiding something. By 2025, the divide was complete: official restraint versus online reconstruction, two worlds staring at the same blank space and calling it evidence. Maybe the TBI really does have the tote, locked away in a room somewhere, waiting for DNA results that never came. Maybe it was never collected at all. Either way, the result is the same: a 4-year vacuum of answers. And in that vacuum, the internet built its own investigation, its own forensics, its own justice system, one thread, one comment, one theory at a time. When law enforcement went silent, the algorithm spoke. When the file closed its pages, the timeline reopened on YouTube. And that's how the black tote stopped belonging to the Wells family, or the TBI, or even the truth. It now belongs to everyone who ever clicked play, a digital relic born of absence, fed by belief, and sustained by the silence of those who should have said something long ago. By now, the tote wasn't evidence. It was mythology, a modern ghost story told through thumbnails and hashtags. But mythology doesn't form from nothing. It forms when people need a shape to contain the things they can't prove. Every unsolved case eventually finds its symbol, an object that carries more meaning than evidence, more weight than fact. In the story of Summer Wells, that symbol is the black tote. At first glance, it's just a missing bag, one that may never have existed beyond a mother's uncertain sentence. But over time, the tote became something larger. It came to represent what the entire investigation couldn't hold, the space between what was said and what was found. In criminal investigations, items that are mentioned but never logged are more than lost property. They're logical voids. They expose the limits of what can be proven. When an object exists only in language, it becomes both evidence and ghost, part of the story, yet outside of it. The tote is exactly that, a phantom piece of evidence haunting a case that refuses to close. For some, it's the last object Summer might have touched. For others, it's the only thing that could still connect the timeline, the bridge between the creek and the basement, between the hours that exist and the ones that don't. But beyond the facts, the tote has taken on emotional weight. Online, its image appears again and again, sketched in fan art, used as a thumbnail, printed on t-shirts raising awareness for missing children. For thousands of people who never met Summer Wells, the tote isn't just a clue. It's a metaphor for the truth that got lost. Psychologists who study collective trauma call this process object fixation. When the human mind faces uncertainty, a disappearance with no closure, a question with no answer, it looks for a physical anchor, something to attach the chaos to. In the Summer Wells case, that anchor became a bag. There are two dominant interpretations of what the tote represents. The first is the memory anchor. For those who sympathize with CanDus Wells, the tote symbolizes her last tangible connection to her daughter, the object she imagined Summer carrying in her final moments. When trauma fractures memory, the mind often replaces missing images with single frozen details. For CanDus, that may have been the tote, a mundane, familiar thing that kept the past from collapsing entirely. It's the same reason survivors hold on to a piece of clothing, a toy, or an object that outlives a loved one. It becomes the vessel of what can't be remembered clearly anymore. The second interpretation is the guilt displacement. This theory, discussed in hundreds of Reddit and YouTube threads, views the tote not as a comfort, but as projection. The mind externalizes guilt or knowledge it can't confront by transferring it to a neutral object. In this reading, the tote carries not craft supplies or memories, but burden. It becomes the physical stand-in for whatever truth the speaker can't name. That doesn't mean CanDus lied. It means the subconscious sometimes hides what the conscious can't face by giving it a shape, a color, and handles. A Reddit user in 2023 phrased it best: the bag knows what the humans forgot. That single line, anonymous, poetic, cruel, captured what everyone in the case seemed to feel but couldn't say. The tote became the knower of secrets, the mute witness. It was what remained when people ran out of explanations. Across the internet, that phrase turned into a quiet slogan, whispered in threads, printed in comment sections, written under candlelight vigils. The bag knows. But what it really knows is how silence multiplies meaning. Because the longer the TBI stayed quiet, the more symbolic the tote became. When law enforcement refuses to fill the gaps, the public does, not with data, but with belief. The tote turned into the crowd's compass. As long as it was missing, the case wasn't over. It was proof, however fragile, that something was still out there to be found. And in a strange way, that's the power of unsolved stories. They transform absence into presence. The tote, in the eyes of the world, is no longer a missing bag. It's the embodiment of a missing truth. It represents everything the official narrative couldn't contain: contradiction, emotion, doubt. It holds the same tension as the house itself, a mother's memory that changes with every retelling, an investigation sealed behind silence, a community unwilling to let go. To investigators, the tote is irrelevant. To the public, it's sacred. Every time someone shares a post with the hashtag 5BlackToteTheory, they're not really talking about a bag, they're talking about hope, frustration, and the refusal to let silence win. Because deep down, everyone knows what the tote stands for. It's the last link between the living and the missing, the question that outlived the answer. And until the truth surfaces, whatever it is, the black tote will remain where it's always been, not in the evidence room, not in the woods, not in a video frame, but in the collective mind of everyone who still needs to believe that the story isn't finished. It has stopped being an object. It's a symbol now, for what was lost, and for what refuses to stay buried. 4 years later, the investigation continues. No arrests, no closure, no confirmation of what the tote ever was. But even as facts fade, the message it leaves behind remains. Because in the end, the story of Summer Wells isn't only about what disappeared. It's about what the world chose to remember. And that's where the final chapter begins, not with a discovery, but with the meaning we give to the things we never found. Every mystery eventually comes down to a choice: what we can prove, what we can't, and what we choose to believe anyway. 4 years after Summer Wells vanished, the black tote remains suspended in that space, between evidence and imagination, between memory and myth. By now, investigators, analysts, and entire online communities have distilled the story into 3 final possibilities. The first, the tote never existed. That theory says it was a fragment of memory, a detail spoken in grief, not fact. CanDus Wells might have confused moments, mixing one ordinary day with another. Maybe she saw a different bag at a different time, or maybe trauma reshaped her recollection until she believed it. Memory, after all, is not a camera. It edits itself for survival. If this version is true, then the tote is a mirage, a ghost detail haunting an already haunted story. The second, the tote was real, but overlooked. Maybe it came home with them from the creek. Maybe it sat in the truck bed, filled with clothes, food, or toys, an object too ordinary to notice when panic set in. In that chaos, officers might have missed it, or dismissed it as irrelevant. If that's what happened, the oversight is tragic, but human. It would mean that the greatest unsolved detail in the case wasn't part of a conspiracy, it was the cost of urgency. Sometimes the truth hides not in deception but in distraction. And the third, most persistent theory, the tote exists, locked away inside a sealed evidence file at the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. If this one is right, then the silence isn't neglect, it's deliberate. Investigators might be holding the detail for a future confession, waiting to see who names the object that only the real culprit could know. It would explain why no one ever confirmed or denied it, why every question about the bag met the same cautious phrase, "What cannot comment on items that may or may not have been collected." In that sense, the tote could still be out there, not in the woods, but in a drawer somewhere in Nashville, tagged and sealed, waiting for a truth that no one's ready to release. No matter which version is right, the lesson remains the same. A single overlooked detail can rewrite an entire case. One object, mentioned once and erased, can fracture the timeline, reshape public memory, and outlive every official statement. The black tote shows how fragile truth becomes when silence fills the gaps. It also reveals something larger, that in the digital age, the internet sometimes remembers what institutions forget. When investigators move on, people online archive, screenshot, preserve. They build their own record of absence. And sometimes that record outlasts the official one. But memory, even collective memory, comes with risk. The longer a theory circulates, the more it hardens into belief, and belief, once solid, can resist correction. What began as a missing bag became a symbol of guilt, then hope, then faith. It became proof that the story of Summer Wells still mattered, that the silence of authority didn't mean the end of inquiry. And maybe that's the real meaning of the tote. It's not about what it contained. It's about what it carried. It carried fear, when people realized a child could vanish from her own home without a trace. It carried obsession, when strangers online dissected every second of grainy footage. And, in its own strange way, it carried hope, because as long as something was missing, people could still look for it. In that sense, the tote became the final witness, not of what happened to Summer, but of how the world reacted when the truth refused to surface. The case still sits open, active, unfinished. The TBI continues to accept leads. The Wells family remains divided between grief and public suspicion. And the black tote, whether real or not, floats above it all, unclaimed, unverified, and unforgettable. Every story has its evidence, its silence, and its symbol. For Summer Wells, those three are the same thing. And so the final words belong to the paradox that has driven this case from the beginning, the statement that defines its gravity, its uncertainty, and its endurance. No one has proven the tote ever existed. Yet no one has proven it didn't. And that's why the case of Summer Wells still feels unfinished. Until someone opens the truth, or the tote itself, the story will remain what it's always been, a mystery held together by absence, and a silence still waiting to speak.